Unlocking Website Success series. I am here today with Emma, and I'm very, very excited for this conversation. Funny enough, just the way it worked out that this conversation ended up very near to the end of the series. In my head, I'd always imagined it right at the start, but I think it sort of works out this way too, because this is one of the most important pieces. Like, all the things we've talked about in this series, from your images to video to SEO to so many pieces, advertising, marketing. And next week, we're talking about email marketing and how that plays into driving traffic back to your website. And all those pieces are so important. But the only ones, in my opinion, that are absolutely necessary at the start are copy and images, right? Those are you can't have a website without them, right? And all the other pieces are gravy. So this is a conversation I'm really, really looking forward to having. Thank you so much, Emma, for bringing your expertise to this series. Why don't you tell everyone a little about yourself?
Thanks so much for having me, Ellen.
Oh, I think we've lost Emma, because her little bar here on my screen has a little internet down. So I'll just give you a summary of the general. Oh, are you back? Oh, it kind of keeps popping in and out, and I can see on your internet down here, it shows that your internet connection's a little bit spotty.
See if there's anything I can do. I'll disconnect a couple of things just to make sure that there's nothing else disrupting. But I'll just give a little bit of an intro to kind of me and the business that I'm in and what kind of led me to where I am just now. So my name's Emma. I'm a copywriter. My business is called Magnetic Copy. I primarily work with service providers to do personality-driven copy, which I know we're going to get into a little bit later, Ellie, because I know that's something you love to talk to your clients about as well. Really helping people get the essence of themselves and the value they have to offer across, because then that way they can hit the right people with their messaging. I've always kind of been in this space. I actually celebrated 2 years in business last week, so I'm still pretty new to being self-employed, but it also feels like I've been doing this forever. I can't imagine doing anything else anymore. But I was always in copy and content, primarily in the travel industry. Whenever I did my history degree, I kind of did it because I didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life. And then I fell into marketing by accident, like I think a lot of people do, just through various kind of extracurriculars and stuff at uni. And from there, got internships and jobs in travel, tourism, hospitality, and was in social media first, which was enough to make me realize that I did not want to do that as a job. I think people who do it are amazing, but it is just so not for me. It's just too short form and reactive, I think, for the way that I work and the way that I write. But I then got a job as a copywriter for a big travel agency in Scotland, which is where I'm based. And so that was constantly switching between tone of voices and brand guidelines and different messaging and putting out different pieces to fulfill these different campaign objectives. And it was a total baptism of fire, but it really taught me how to adjust in between these different voices. From there, I kind of moved into more general marketing work and still freelanced on the side a lot. And then was kind of just coasting along, as I think a lot of people end up doing in their jobs. And then pandemic happened, and all of a sudden the industry I'd been working in for 5 years disappeared overnight. There was no more travel. The world shut down. Nobody could do anything or go anywhere. And it kind of gave me the space to think, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think I want to do something else. And the freelancing really picked up during COVID. I was doing a lot of freelance writing work, and there'd always been a voice in the back of my head, I think, like a lot of us have, saying, you should write for yourself. You should start your own business and write for your own clients. And the voice just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And then eventually I just hit a point in 2021 where I thought that myth of security from a full-time job has been smashed for me in the last year, because I didn't have any. It was just so up and down for such a long time, incredibly stressful and anxiety inducing. And I thought, I can create the security by doing this for myself. And it's definitely, I don't know if it's the same for you, Ellie, but it's a much better fit for my personality than being an employee ever was. Is actually just being in charge of everything and it being on me, whether it works or not. So I just decided, gotta go, handed in my notice and just took the plunge and hit the ground running. And touch wood, it's all been going very well since then, and I'm absolutely loving every minute of it.
I love that. Funny enough, I think I was actually a really good employee. But I think it's because of the companies I worked in. I've never worked for a big company. I always worked for really small companies, which meant I wore a lot of hats. I was given a lot of responsibility. And once people saw who I was, how organized, proactive, all those things, like I got a job when I moved here to Northern Ireland, and it was a very, very small law firm. And they
Yeah.
hired me as a receptionist. And by the time I left the place, not even 2 years later, I was fire marshal, receptionist, social media manager, event planner.
Yeah.
I was not the reception. I was a legal secretary. Like I was doing so data protection officer, like everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like so I've been lucky in those types of roles. But we're here to talk about websites and copy.
Yeah.
So, can you start us off just in the real basics for somebody who's maybe not written a website, or for somebody who maybe doesn't have one yet or had somebody else do theirs and they kind of haven't looked at it? Tell us a little bit about like the core and the basics of web copy and what makes it different.
Sure. And I think that's a big question, is what's the difference between copy and content, right? That comes up all the time. Is that, okay, you can write, but what's the difference between the two? And to me, copy is about selling. That's kind of the point of it. That's the point of the website, right? It needs to reflect what you do, what your values are, the USPs that you offer to your target audience, and then give them something to do to actually get them to get in touch. Because you can have the most beautifully written story in the world, but if there's no action to take at the end of it, and there's no kind of point as to what it means for the reader, no one's going to do anything with it. And I think that's definitely a trap that people can fall into. So copy at its very basic function to me is writing words that sell to the right people. And in doing that, you have to make sure that it's about them. You have to be constantly thinking about your reader the whole time you're writing. And I think sometimes whenever people are very kind of ingrained in the day-to-day of what they're doing, they can look at it a little bit too much from their own perspective, as a business owner's perspective or as a business perspective. And that isn't ever really going to work. And I know that design plays such a huge part in that as well, because it always has to be with the user's perspective in mind. So copy to me is words that sell to the right people.
Right. And there's so much that you just said there that I want to like pick apart. The right people, the whole thing about your personality that we've touched on. I really want to touch on what you were saying about making sure your user's in mind the whole time. Because that's something you're right. And then calls to action, like, which are so important. So let's talk about, there's so many pieces in this that I think are just going to come together naturally the more we talk, without having to make it a formula so much. But I think one of the things that people often do is they focus on all the benefits of their product. They pretty much say, this is what my product is. It has all these things included, or their service or whatever. It's, here's the deliverables essentially.
Yes.
And people don't care about the deliverables. They care about the transformation, what it's going to get for them, what all those deliverables are going to help them achieve.
Yeah, totally. I always talk to clients about it because it's so kind of, you're right, people focus on features so much. They say, it does this, this, and this, but people care about an outcome. As you've said, people care about the transformation that is going to be caused in their life by engaging with this product or service. It's like the classic kind of iPod version of this, right? It's, the number of songs in your pocket type thing, rather than the amount of memory that it's got. It's an actual, like, you need to create something tangible that people can really understand and apply to their own lives, because that's how you're going to get the right people into your business.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing you keep saying, is the right people. I think a lot of people forget that your business isn't just meant to attract the right people. It's also meant to repel the wrong people. And I think the reason I talk about your website needing to be your home base for your message and all these things, like there's so many things that we've talked about, blogging and podcasting in this series, and they're all so important for various reasons. Showing your expertise is probably the most important of them all, for all those things. But your website, like, is meant to be the home base of all of your message. Your message should be from your website extrapolated to all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
And your website, when done well, your copy, when done well, should invite the right people and tell the wrong people, hey, you're not in the right place, or maybe it's not the right time.
100%, 100%. And it's why with any client I work with, and I'm sure you do something similar, I really, before I start writing anything, I really need to help them drill down exactly who it is they're trying to speak to, because so much of the time it can be quite a loose kind of group of people, and it's not, I always try to get people to think about things more holistically as well. So it's less about kind of straight up and down boxes of demographics and ages and that kind of thing. And it's much more about where are they in their lives? What do they need? What can you provide? And what does that mean? And I think whenever people kind of think about it from that perspective, it's almost like a light bulb goes off sometimes. Because I think something that I find with clients, especially whenever they've had their website for a few years and maybe they cobbled it together themselves when they started, or they got somebody else to do it, is if they haven't looked at it for a while, the message that they have on it right now probably isn't going to be attracting the clients that they want to be attracting at this point in their business, because everything changes, right? It's a transformational thing just being in business. The people you work with and the fulfillment you get from your work is going to change over time. And so you need to really understand who you want to attract to your business, and then also who are you attracting to your business, and are they the same person? Because there's that side of it too. And if it's not the right person, if it's not the person you want to be bringing in, then you definitely need to do some work on what it is you're offering and the messaging you're putting out with it to make that change for yourself too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is, a lot of times people sort of treat a website like it's a set it and forget it thing, but it's meant to be a constantly evolving thing. I only redid my website copy and I did a big overhaul in January, and I am now changing one side of my services, and I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of work to do. God.
And it's
Got a lot to, and it's not
everything to do.
I'm still offering the same two core types of services, but the way I'm going to be delivering it is really going to change, and that's going to be different. Like that is going to be a different type of person I'm talking to for that service, because and honestly, it's going to be more aligned in a lot of ways. But I think another thing you talked about that a thing that I see people do quite a lot is they talk, like you said, like about the business or about like, they just talk, not necessarily they talk to the person, but not necessarily in the right way. So what I mean by this is usually they keep themselves too centered, right? Like you were saying. So they're either using a lot of technical jargon or industry words, or their about page is actually like about them. I know that's a really weird thing to say if you're outside our world, but your website really, your about page really shouldn't be about you. It's about how you're uniquely positioned to solve their problems.
100%.
So tell us a bit about that, because you know far more than I do.
It's such an interesting thing, because it's such a simple reframing, I think, that people need a lot of the time. And it's something I've been talking about a little recently, which is on your about page. So you go onto the about page of a website and it has, a brief company history, a timeline, information like we opened our new office on this date and we grew our team to this size and we won this award. And all of that information is fine, but everything on your about page, with every single thing that you write, it should be does this matter to my reader? And if so, why? So it can be such a simple reframing. It's not even like, because obviously you need to talk about yourself on your about page, but everything you say has to be funneled towards this information proves that I am the right person to work with you, or this information proves that this product is the right thing for you. And I think whenever it's almost like people need to ask themselves that pretty much with every sentence that they write, to be honest. And people don't do it because, again, as we've said, you're so stuck in what you're doing every day that you kind of forget that this isn't for you or about you necessarily. It's what makes you the right choice for the person reading it. And you're so right about the technical jargon side of things as well. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, but simple copy is always going to be the most effective, because I don't know about you, but if I go on a website and I see a heap of information and language that I don't understand, I'm not going to go and Google what it means. I'm just going to leave. Like I'm not going to take the time, because the job is on the business or the business owner to educate me in a way that I can find accessible if that is needed. It shouldn't be on me to then go away and figure out what everything means on my own, if that makes sense.
And this ties into like the design thing as well, because a lot of times I'll get a bunch of copy from somebody and it's, or you'll see a website and it's a big wall of text. So that's almost the same thing. It's like people aren't going to read that whole thing. You've got to break it up with bullet points or spacing or add some images or icons. Like that's my job. I don't expect my clients to always do that. They just have to give me the copy so that I can make that happen. But it is like that same idea. You need to make it digestible for people.
Yes. 100%.
And I think it's something that a lot of people miss on websites, because it can be so easy to just be like, well, here's the information.
Yeah. It's about being kind of strategic about what really needs to be there as well, because there's so many other opportunities to go into detail, right? Like if you want to describe like everything about your background, make it a series of blog posts that people can optionally read if they want to learn more, and just have the essential information on your website. Because you're right, those like breaking up text and headings and bullet points, all of that is so key to making things more digestible and accessible. But there's still a point where when a page is too long, like at what point are people actually going to stop reading it? And it's much quicker than anybody thinks as well. So there's
really
options for you to expand on all of this information. You just don't have to put it all in this one place.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I'm often trying to get my clients to edit. I think a lot of times, I think it's interesting because I see specific industries that people are wordier. I don't know what it is about people that are sort of in the holistic-y wellness yoga area. They love to write things down and they love to say a lot. And I mean, it's beautiful. It's usually beautifully written and a lot of really good information. But you're right. You're at a point where you're kind of like, well, nobody's going to read all this. We have to edit it. And my clients usually are lovely and do that. But, or there's people in industries that are, they have maybe a lot of like certifications and stuff. And I'm like, nobody cares about these. And I know that's a really weird thing to say. And I'm just going to say this. You've said this in a nicer way, but I'm going to say this in a sort of a crass, crude way, because I think it makes it really impactful. Like, I ask my clients, why the fuck would they care? Like, if they, like, and I say that because if you put it like, do they fucking care? Would you fucking care? And like putting just that really, I know it's like an F word, but I swear constantly, but I think putting it in that really almost like really guttural, like, if you went on somebody's website and this was there, would it matter to you? And it's not that we can't have your credentials, but it shouldn't be a hugely prominent thing. A line of logos or a drop down section that says my qualifications and it's an accordion. Like they can be there.
Yeah.
But I don't think they need to feature as heavily as a lot of people make.
Totally. I think as well in like the coaching space, for example, you touched on that almost like holistic space. People can definitely put all of their qualifications in. And I think, as you say, having a row of logos or even a bullet point list if you need to is fine. But there's almost an implication in there that people will understand what that means too. People will understand what these qualifications are. You understand what they are because you got them, but your target reader probably doesn't care that much. There's a way of putting that information across that doesn't involve 20 different courses that you've done over a certain point of time, and then having to explain what each of them means. It's just about putting across that you're highly experienced, highly knowledgeable, like you are the person who can make this change for the reader, rather than it's almost like that, features thing again, isn't it? It's just that information that people don't actually really care about because it doesn't drill down to the key point.
And I think I try and focus on authority. Like authority building is so important on your website. And I think that usually if you can do it visually, it's better. So, testimonials where it's only a couple lines, but you have an image of that person, or it's a video, um, or, a row of icons of all the people, your top clients, or where your work has been featured. Those kinds of things are more impactful because people's brains will process them without actually having to read anything.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, because it's so interesting, because people always say, oh, you wouldn't want people to use video and images and stuff as copyright, or you just want people to use words. And I think, well, no, because everything works together. It's the combination of everything that really leads to a website, in this case, being successful. It's the video that you can put together, it's the testimonials you can include, it's the images that bring you to life. It all has to fit in order to work, because one element on its own isn't going to be enough, really, for the most part, to actually do the job.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about best practices with website copy, so obviously there's lots and lots of types of copy out there, but let's focus on the website copy. What are like some really key things that stand out to you?
The number one thing is keeping things simple, 100%. I can't envision, and I've worked on a lot of different projects. I've worked with a lot of different clients in a lot of different spaces, and there's never been a point where I've thought, this complex term should be used here, and here's why, because the reader, there's always this implication, I think, with people, as we've said, that business owners can sometimes assume that their reader has the same level of knowledge about their field as they do, and they almost never do. It'll be your competition who will know the same amount as you. It'll be the people in your office who will know the same amount as you. Your reader, your target client probably won't. That's why they need you, right? That's why they need your help for the most part. So keep things really, really simple is always my kind of number one key point. I also think as well, people can, as we said, get a little bit overexcited and really feel the need to over-explain things sometimes. And so I always, when I'm helping people to write their own copy, or I'm giving advice on that, I tell them to do something which I do every time I'm writing a page, which is the post-it note check. So what I do is I write out the key message, like the key USP or the key benefit or the key outcome for the client, for example, on a post-it note, and I stick it up on the wall. And then every so often when I'm writing, I think, God, right, okay. And I'll look at it and I'll be honest with myself about whether that key point is actually coming through strongly enough, or if it's got lost in a lot of other detail. And so much of the time it can get lost because you get a bit overexcited and you can't really figure out what information to prioritize. So have one key message in at least your sections. I mean, I would say for a lot of the time on your page, you should really have one key message, to be honest. And just make sure that that's really clear, because if anybody's coming away from your website confused about what it is that you do, that's not going to help you get to those right people.
Yeah, totally. And I think the way that I treat things is different than a lot of other website designers, but the homepage, first off, in my opinion, is sort of a directory for people. Like, you don't want it to be like every offer or thought or way someone can plug in with you, but it really should be all the key ways that people can plug in with you, whether that be a list of your services, a way to preview and maybe get a snippet of what's going on your blog, some testimonials, a little bit about you, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that they can then sort of choose their own adventure, so to speak. The other, and I think that's really important. And then, from there, pretty much every other page should have one key thought that people are focusing on. You and I have talked about this a little bit before, but my thing about websites is I'm a firm believer that form follows function. There's a lot of designers that will give you a wireframe or will design something up in Figma, and you have like all of this. So you then have to constrain every image, every word, everything into this tiny, or into this layout that's been pre-created.
Yes.
But website layouts don't, okay, this is going to be like a revolutionary weird thing that I don't think I've ever said before. Website layouts don't fucking matter. Like, they don't. And the reason they don't matter is because the message matters. And the message comes through, as we talked about with Karen, it's in the images as well. So your images, your video, your icons, your font choices, along with your website words, all make that message, right? It gives people your color choices, if you're choosing open, spacious colors, bright colors, warm colors, kind of like you're telling that story visually and through your words.
Yeah.
But the way you actually structure and lay that out doesn't matter.
It's the whole, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, what comes first, the design or the copy is such an interesting topic that people feel so differently about. Based on my experience, I pretty much as I can, exclusively work with designers who take exactly the same approach as you, because there's just a recognition that it needs, the website needs to be built around the message, as you've said. And I don't know if you've had the experience before. One that I really try to avoid is when design and web are working at the same time, but not together. Whenever design and copy are at the same time, not together, it's a nightmare, because it just ends up taking so much longer, because no one's communicating about what needs to be done. And that can be really challenging, is definitely what I find. So the designers that I usually work with always say, to the client, I'm not building anything until you've signed off on the copy, because at that point, I know exactly what I'm working with, and the design gets done so much quicker as a result, is generally what they say, and just more efficiently, and just everybody, I'm sure from your end, there's probably less edits and adjustments needed, and rounds of changes and stuff. It just streamlines the process so much.
Like I have a client, well, she I don't know if she'll ever see this, but if she does, like, sending all your love. But she sent me a draft of her copy, and she's waiting for revisions from her copywriter friend, essentially. And I'm like, cool. Now I have a bit of an idea of what I'm going off, but I'm not doing anything, because again, if a bunch of things change, then if the length of this paragraph changes a whole lot, then I'm redesigning. So I don't, because I need to know where the headings are, where the main paragraphs are, like all of these things, because, well, I can change things a little, right? I can like break a paragraph up a little, or maybe add in some bullet points or some icons or something here and there. There's usually some scope for that from the copywriter. I really can't drastically change the copy without changing the message, right? So I can't change the length of things, those kinds of things very much. But I firmly believe that in the form follows function, because people have to connect with your words. They have to connect with all that. And I can design a website that looks exactly how you want it to look. And around that, like if you want a spacious, warm, inviting website with all these features, I can do that. But it's going to make so much more sense to do it after I've received your copy, right?
100%. Because the tone is so clear immediately, isn't it? And it just helps inform everything. Even I got my own website built a couple of months ago, and I was sort of the client that I hate in a way, because I was so busy with client work that it took me a little bit longer to write the copy than I thought. But actually seeing it with my own stuff just reinforced it in my head even further, that the words were so integral to actually helping create the feel of the website, and create the build of the website. Because whenever we talked about this a little bit before, but whenever I have to work, say somebody's built a box, as you say, in a wireframe, and there's room for 30 words, and that's it, that's all I have to work with to get a key message across. And it is so dependent on the business whether that's actually practical or not. It's so difficult. And then, as you say, with on your side, if if you built something and then I send you 8 lines, but you've only got space for 3, then it's how do we actually kind of condense this down, and how do we make this more, like, how do we not make this a really laborious thing that's going to take a long time? So I think you're absolutely right. It's like when you work it in stages, it just makes things so much easier. And I think definitely using words first.
Yeah, I don't start projects until I have photos and copy, because you can tweak the colors, you can add a new logo, but you cannot redesign around, like, if somebody has all vertical images, that's going to affect the design, those kinds of things. And we talked about that with Karen. So those are the 2 things that are really key for me. The other thing, just technically, for all of you watchers out there, 2 technical tips I have if you are writing your own copy. One, bring the margins of your page like way in so you can kind of see what it's going to look like. It changes everything. Because you're going to get an idea for how, like, that paragraph that looks really short on like a full weight document is going to look really smushed, which is the point. That's how your website's going to look, especially if you stick it next to an image. Or And the other thing is, like, I have another client that has recently sent me over their copy, and I'm like, did you look at that document I sent you? Like, I have a workbook. It's a Google form for people who are DIYing, and it's based on StoryBrand. And it's got a whole bunch of brainstorming room for them, and then it says tying it all together, and it says homepage headline, list of all the services you offer, a snippet of about you, so I can intro to them into the out. And I think it's that format that people who are DIYing don't necessarily know to follow, right? That you're going to need that copy at the top of the page. Then you're going to need a little bit about who you are and what you do. And then you're going to need to opt people into, like, here's what I have to offer you on the homepage, and then snippets so that we can direct them to the longer form pages. And so thinking that through, like the functionality of that. And if you don't know it, look up StoryBrand or look up other website examples that you love, or get in touch with a copywriter.
Yeah, totally. And it's because it's one of those things where I think people can sometimes think, oh, if I talk to a copywriter, I'm going to need to pay X amount of money. And, for the most part, certainly speaking for myself, I'm very happy to give people advice whenever, they really want to have that control for themselves. Because I think that, as you say, this is very old hat to us. Like, this is information that we know, but so much of the time, this is something quite new to our clients whenever we're working with them. So there is definitely some education that can be required. I do some consultation work with clients who really want to write their own websites, but they just need help to get the foundations in place first, because there's no point in them starting to write something and then 3 months later thinking, actually, I think my target market might be slightly different, pulling it all back down and starting again. It's almost like you can get that advice without necessarily needing to use a copywriter if that's not something that you're interested in. But get some advice and look around, as you've said, because it'll just help you structure things so much easier. Because when people don't know, it's very easy for them then to send it to you, I'm sure, and then for you to think, well, that isn't gonna fit anywhere, and here are all the reasons why. But they just don't know that. So I love the fact that you do a workbook, and it just helps give a little bit of structure to something that people can find quite overwhelming, I find, to do it themselves, especially if it's first time.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so if you are DIYing your copy, your website copy, and you're trying to drill down, and you've touched a little bit of it, drilling down on who your people are, and then you're trying to sound like yourself and drawing out that message. Do you have any tips for that?
So it's such an interesting thing, because Ellie, I know that you go networking as well, and that's something that I do quite a lot. And I wonder if you ever find this, is that people can be so good at pitching themselves in a networking room. They come across exactly how they are, and then you read their website and it's like a completely different person has written it. And you're like, whoa, where did this disconnect happen in the middle? And I know that people are super afraid of being themselves and putting themselves out there. I think they're worried it's going to turn people off. I would argue that you're going to turn people off that aren't the right fit for you. So that's kind of part of the point.
Really quick, I think a lot of times people will see that it might not be professional enough. I think that's it.
And I think as well, the world is changing so much. Like the impact that personal brand has now in comparison with, even 5 years ago is huge. And I think with the rise of artificial intelligence and these huge kind of corporations, people are more interested in authentic connections and feeling like they really relate to someone. People buy on emotion rather than logic. People want to know who you are, especially, for example, if you're a service provider, who are the kind of typically the people that I work with. So something that I always say to people is actually read your copy out loud whenever you write it. So say you write a first draft, read it out loud, and then ask yourself, does this actually sound like me, or does this sound like somebody completely different? Because that's such a key way, because you're hearing it in your own voice. And all of a sudden it's a little bit more like you're talking in that networking room or on that, client call or something like that. And you're hearing it and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't sound like me. How can I make it sound like me? And then it's just thinking like the way you describe things, the words and phrases that you use. You know, whenever I'm working with clients, I keep a little word bank of the way they describe things and the certain like little idiosyncrasies in the language that they use, so that I can then inject that into the copy, and then they read it and they think, oh, that actually really sounds like me. So people can do that for themselves as well. You know, I think it's just about having that confidence that you are the person that people want to work with. You are the person that is attracting people to your business. People want to hear your voice and hear from you. And I think whenever people start to think about it like that, it can make it that much easier to really get a bit more of their own personality across.
Yeah, totally. And those are all things that I've sort of learned the hard way.
Yeah.
So my business, I won't go into this too much, but my degree was in biology and community health. So when I
Wow.
started my own business and had to like write copy and blog posts, and so copy and content, both of them came out sort of sounding clinical. And I think I spent a lot of time writing what I think people wanted to hear versus what I knew they needed to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so not in the same way, not to confuse people. We talked earlier about writing in the tone and things that people can digest. That's different than the actual content
Yes.
that people need to hear, right? So you kind of write what people want to hear. Nobody will then read it because it sounds boring and bland and generic, maybe. But so I made that mistake quite a few times.
And we all have, for sure. I mean, even when I started, I kind of wrote, I didn't really know what my business was going to be. I didn't really know. I knew that I wanted to work with clients that weren't in travel because I loved travel, but I'd done it and I was ready to do something else. And I wanted to keep building my skills and I wanted to figure out what I like the most. So when I look back at my website, you know, even 6 months in, I was like, oh, like, because it's not quite right. Because I was very much in that space of, you know, being brand new to running a business. I didn't know how much of myself I should be or how much of myself I could be when I was putting myself out there. And then I realized pretty quickly it would be very exhausting to try and be anything but myself. So I'm just not going to do it. And then at that point, I was able to think, okay, this website does not sound as much like me as it needs to. Let's make some changes. Yeah. So I think it's that getting that confidence, you know, to really feel it. And as you say, you know, your background can dictate so much of it. I've worked with academics before, and so the way they write is very specific, but it's not quite going to work for their business. It's just their background. And sometimes it can take a little bit of unlearning to really get to the heart of what it is you want to say.
Yeah. And I have a few tricks that I've learned. Some of them you've mentioned. So I do keep a little bit of a bank of words and things that I use. So I say, heya. Like I don't write hi, hello. I mean, I do sometimes like in an email, but most of the time I say, heya, like, heya, like, hey. So I know that. I swear in my content and my copy very intentionally because I never want somebody to hop on a call and be offended. I want them to know in advance that that is my mouth. That is what comes out of it. That is an intentional thing. I also have started keeping a bank of things people say to me about my work. So this is not just testimonials, but I do take snippets from that. But I very frequently, I've done this multiple times this year, done research calls with people that I know are my ideal clients. And just seen where they're at, what they're thinking, the words they use around the type of work I do. So like I know that what I do pretty much is systems, but the idea of systems, automation, technology freak people out. So I try and use other words to describe what I do. Simplicity, doing business with ease, freeing up time, taking yourself off manual mode. That taking yourself off manual mode, that I took directly from a client case study. But it was one of the best ways to describe what I do that I'd ever seen.
Yeah. 100%. And it comes very naturally like that as well. I think I had already known, say, a year ago that I loved working with clients in the personality kind of led copy space of really trying to get into somebody's head and write as them. But clients were the people who kept saying it to me. You know, they were saying like it's like I wrote it, but it's better. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the best compliment someone can give me because that's what I'm trying to do. So that's what I've been able to lean on in promoting my services to other people as well, because you know that you're going to find more of that right person. So that's a really good thing actually for anybody to do. Another thing I was going to say on the website copy side of things, alongside looking at your own key message and asking yourself if it's coming through, ask people who have nothing to do with your business. as well. So like and not even, I wouldn't ask my partner necessarily because he runs his own business too, and he knows everything that's going on in my life because I either like I'm joyful about it or complain about it. So he knows, but like I'll get, my parents know a little bit less, my sister knows less, my friends know less. Ask them what the key message is that's coming across. Ask them if it sounds like you, because they'll be honest, because they know you, but they don't know your business. And that can be really important feedback to get. So it's like those research calls, but it's also looking like close to home for the messaging side of things, for sure.
Yeah, totally. When I redesigned my website in January, I got to the point where, no matter what you do, if you're doing something you're spending several hours on, you get to the point where you're like, I'm looking at this cross-eyed and I cannot see the wood through the trees or any, like, you can use as many like metaphors as you want. You just can't see it for what it is anymore. You have no distance from it. You have very little, like, so eventually you just have to kind of hand it over to your for feedback. You have to hand it over to, like, just being done is better than perfect, putting it out there and letting yourself know, okay, somebody's gonna like you will let it evolve on the page live as well sometimes.
Yeah.
100%.
And knowing that that's fine as well. Like, your business is going to evolve. The services or the products you offer are going to evolve naturally. So don't ever wait for something to be what you define as perfect, because it's never going to happen, because everything is just constantly changing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about so much of what I want to talk about. I think it's just like, I think it can be challenging to speak it as yourself. I think because I've gone from like iteration to iteration of this, right? And the more I am myself in my business, the more I take up space as exactly who I am, the more my business grows in like a multitude of ways. I'm working with who I like to work with. I make money that way better. I have more alignment. I have better boundaries. Like, it's all just like so many things that stem from just being who you are in business. One thing that I don't personally do, but I know somebody who does, and her messaging is so effective, like so effective, is one of my coaches. She will pick somebody, one of her ideal clients. She's got a few to work with now, and she will pick somebody and write to that person.
Nice.
Yeah, like to that specific person, because she knows that the types of issues that people are coming up, she's a coach, will be, there's not just one person experiencing that. The other thing is in her community, if we talk about something that's affecting us or impacting us or whatever, she knows that, again, the people who are on the other side of the doors that haven't joined yet are probably facing those things too. So she has this bank of resources just by having this community. But I know the same thing. I know to pull, like, I used to just ask people for testimonials, and I still do to an extent, but I have chosen to take time to dig in and ask, where were you before you worked with me? What has it allowed you to do after working with me? Not just, it was great, I recommend her. It was, those kinds of things, which are great too for my Google reviews or whatever. But being able to say, I took this person from here to here, gives you the language to talk about that transformation that you're offering.
It's the outcome of everything, as we've said, that people are most interested in. You need to give them the after. You need to give them what their life is going to look like after engaging with your product or after engaging with your service, because that's something they can tangibly imagine for themselves. And that's so important. I had something similar quite recently where I worked with a client, and this wasn't even a testimonial. This was just an email feedback piece from like a first draft. And she said, I finally get my own business. And I was like, whoa, that's huge. Like, because she'd been feeling so not confident in the way she'd been putting things across, and just so worried that the message wasn't clear. And, all it takes is the right language in order to sell it. And as you've said, whenever you put yourself out there, whenever you put more of yourself into it, you find that language and it brings the right people to you so much more often. And it just helps you grow, I think, as well as your business, let alone anything else.
Yeah, totally. I think another couple of tips, sometimes when people really struggle to write about their business, If you can voice note it to yourself, you can
Yes.
edit, you can have that transcribed, go
Totally.
ahead, and then it will just give you points to work from. It'll also get some of that how I sound thing down.
Yeah.
Like if you use contractions, if you say y'all, if you swear, it'll all end up in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you a good place to start as well when you're feeling a little overwhelmed.
100.
Yeah, just I had another one. It's ran away, but so I
There's so
want
many. It's just doing all the things you can do to really ask yourself, does this sound like me? Because you know yourself, you know how you talk to the people in your life, you know, and as you say, that voice note thing is amazing because it's that same, you know, hearing it out loud, you think, okay, this is something, it's not necessarily pulling all of it in, but it's thinking, here are the very specific points of this that I can pull into my copy that will resonate with the right person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think the way you speak will evolve, the way you speak about your business will evolve. So like you're never going to have it right all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You will outgrow your copy. You will need to
Yes.
revise your copy.
Oh yeah.
And that's like all places, not just websites. I'm like thinking I did this thing called the 9 grid method on my Instagram. So it's like a mini website. And I did that at the start of the year as well when I did my website. And I'm thinking, I got to update that too. So
Yeah, for sure.
I want to talk a little about the like technical side of copy.
Mhm.
And so these are the things that probably some people either don't know how to do or maybe wouldn't even know exist.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a bit daunting for anybody watching, but don't be. So I want to talk about increasing conversions
Yeah.
and I want to talk about SEO.
Yeah.
And so do you want to kick us off in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, the increasing conversion thing's one of the most effective things people can do, and it's so simple, is look at the actual words in your call to action. If you're telling people things like learn more, read more, find out more, there's no urgency behind that, and there's not really any action behind it either. Like the whole point of a call to action is action, getting people to do a very particular thing in order to get in touch. So if you're someone whose website reads a lot of, you know, read more, learn more, find out more, you know, here I am type thing, just change it to say book a call or register for X. Do you know what I mean? It's actually giving people something tangible to do, because I definitely am guilty of, you know, I go on a website and I click on all these different pages with, you know, the find more call to action. And the tab will stay open in my 150 tabs that I have open at any given opportunity. And then eventually I'll close it because I'm not going to read it. And you don't want to be doing that with your website. So really, if conversion is something you're struggling with, call to action is definitely one of the first things I would look at, actually what you're telling people to do and if it's effective and if there's any urgency behind it. Because you know what we're like, we kind of say we're going to do something and then we move on and then we maybe come back to it 6 months later sometimes, but we also maybe don't come back to it 6 months later. Whereas if it gives somebody something to do right now, they're more likely to actually do it. So that would be my number one thing. And I'm sure from a design perspective, you've got loads of kind of things that you would suggest on the conversion side as well.
I think, I mean, keeping it simple is probably the biggest thing for conversion. Like just keeping your website clean, uncluttered, and having,
Yeah.
like you said, that's very much my point is your call to action. Well, I love the idea of the language behind it, which is something that I wouldn't say I'm like super skilled with, but having one main call to action. Now I know your homepage is going to say, learn more about me, sign up for my newsletter, all that. But the primary thing of your website should have one call to action.
Totally.
So for a service-based business, that is going to almost always be book a call. Let's start this conversation. Or I have a client who's like really, really high end. So it's fill out an application to work with me. And that's her thing. But that's fine. That's important too. The other, if you're an e-commerce business, is going to be buy the thing, buy the thing, buy the thing, buy the thing, right? And you're going to have lots of different ways that you tell people buy the thing, check out this collection or like whatever it is, here's a sale. But at the end of the day, you're saying buy the thing, buy the thing, buy the thing, buy the thing, right? And my website, it is over and over again. Let's chat, book on a call today. Like it is that whole free 20 minutes to like it's just over and over again that thing. So keeping it consistent and not having too many calls to action, I think is something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Although I will say more frequently than too many calls to action, I see people having almost none.
Yes, there is that problem. And then there's also, so say, and as we've said, it's about keeping the call to action simple. If someone clicks on it and then needs to jump through 17 hoops in order to actually complete the action, so many people are going to just not do that. So it's about being really intentional with the kind of call to action that you're putting on your website, as you say, making it consistent. But yes, there's so many cases
I think
where
there's such a balance to be struck there with my systems brain, like such a balance to be struck there because, for example, my call to action is book a call. But for that call, I want to qualify that lead a little. I don't want just anybody hopping on that call. I want to know that they are going to take it seriously, right? So I think it's super easy for them. I've made it like technically very simple. They click a link, they pick a date, they tell me a tiny, tiny bit about their business, name, website, social media handle, if they're here, like if they're here for web or tech systems kind of a thing. And that way I can do my homework before the call too. So I can go check out their website and those kinds of things. So yeah, there's like a few steps there, but it's not overwhelming. I'm not giving them the same questionnaire that I'm giving my clients once they're through the door.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. On the SEO side, I know that that's something that people can find quite overwhelming because it's a huge topic on its own. I don't really call myself an SEO copywriter. I always make sure that I do keyword research and factor into page titles, meta descriptions, like within the headings and the body paragraphs on the website. It's always in there. I think any further than that is obviously there's the technical side for the web designer. I also know some incredible SEO guys that if it's a real kind of, I want this to be my number one marketing priority, I will immediately just push them over to those guys because the results they get are unbelievable. But I think for SEO, people need to, one of the key things you can do, and this is maybe more on the content side, and it's, as we've said, just think about the kind of questions that you're asked. Just think about the things that people are bringing up to you all the time, and then go and do your keyword research based on that. Because if I was, say, going to make my, like the SEO keywords on my homepage, I'm based in Glasgow, so say I was going to say copywriter Scotland, that feels quite counterproductive in a lot of ways because there's going to be so many other people with those same things. And it's also what kind of copywriter, right? It's one of those things as well. There's so many different people who specialize in different versions of writing copy that it's actually a little bit counterproductive. So I always say to people, think about what it is that you have to offer. Think about the things that people are asking you. And then let's go away and look at keywords from there and logically pick what's going to be the thing that makes the most sense. Because a lot of the time you shouldn't be competing with the people who are, you shouldn't be competing with the people who have got, like, those search terms, that have got millions of hits, because that's going to be very, very hard to actually get results with unless you've got the budget to really put behind a very robust, continuous SEO strategy, which a lot of small business owners just don't have because it can be quite expensive.
Yeah, totally. And going, like, my perspective so with Google's most recent change to the way that they are indexing and doing SEO it is human centered. So keyword stuffing is like out the door, right? So answering those questions, both in your copy, but actually having a frequently asked question section on your website that is still sounds like you and still keeps up with the way you speak and the way your messages and keeping all of that in mind. But having that section is going to be great for SEO because literally when people search things, it's going to be there. Writing blog posts or having content on your site, whether that be a blog or a podcast or YouTube or whatever, that answers those questions. Like a lot of my website traffic comes from like 3 or 4 YouTube videos that I've done that people are looking for answers to all the time, right? How to embed this thing in Squarespace? How do I change my colors or my fonts in Squarespace? Those kinds of things. And I'm not the first person to create those videos. Like there's other videos out there, but people are finding mine for a reason because I've used the exact words they're searching for.
Yes, 100%.
And I think the other thing is, like, remember that SEO is a long game. Even if, say, your copywriter gives you the most pristine and perfect SEO headlines, page titles, meta
Yeah.
description, which some of these are jargony. I understand that. Some of these are just, they're little snippets of things that go into the page.
With what Google shows you when you search for things,
Yes,
essentially,
that's
is the
the
easiest way of putting it. Yeah.
This is exactly what Google shows when you search. And that in Squarespace goes into like a weird page setting section. And you can have all of that perfect, but you're probably still not going to rank on page 1 because Google needs to know your website's existed for a while. It's continuously updated, that people link to your website because it's an authority, and all of these things that take time to build up.
Yes, 100%. I think, and I know that people can fall into the trap where sometimes they get emails from people saying, we'll get you to the top 1 result on page 1 of Google in 6 weeks. And it's like, that doesn't exist. It won't happen. Like, that can't, like, it just isn't how Google works. So I think if people are really going to focus on SEO, as you've said, they need to focus on it as a long game. They need to be like willing to kind of, it's not going to be 100% perfect straight away. It's going to take time, but if you can put that time in, you will reap the rewards from it 100%.
Yeah. And I'm really excited for Squarespace users out there. And I'm going to do a video about this when the series is ended, because they launched it earlier this year, but it's come leaps and bounds. There is essentially, it's called SEO Space, and it is like the Yoast of Squarespace, and it's new, but it is so effing good. It has taken this sort of clunky process that Squarespace gives you to optimize for SEO. Squarespace is meant to be out of the box pretty good for SEO, and it is, but there's things you can do to make it even better, and things that you wouldn't necessarily know, like metadata length and things like that, where it really helps you analyze those things. And the free plan is epic. So I'm going to do a full video on that for anyone interested in that later, because I've been using it now in my business since the start of the year. So I feel now that I have enough information on my own end to talk about it properly. Yeah. But thank you so much. Like, this is, I just got to like geek out for an hour, and I don't know where the hour went.
The time is flowing in. Yeah, I was going to say, I can't believe we're at time. That's crazy.
But thank you so much. Can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Absolutely. So my website is www.magneticCopy.co.uk. And then also, if you search my name on LinkedIn, I'm pretty regular with content on LinkedIn. That's a good place to find me. I've got little red dots in my headline, and my hair is a pretty identifiable feature because it's so bright white. So people usually find me pretty quickly. But those are the 2 key places that people can just reach out, because I'm always happy to chat and help people any way I can about all things copy.
Yes. Yeah, that's how Emma and I met, I think, was LinkedIn. But yeah, and by dots, she means she's got like emojis essentially that are like red circles that are sort of bullet points. Very, very identifiable, which is right. And if you go to her website, you kind of see that same, like it's very clear. She's very good with the brand. Well, thank you again so much. And if, by the way, we're going to sign off now here, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to comment on the video, and Emma or I can get back to you over on YouTube.
Fab. Thanks so much, Ellie, for having me again. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.